Hey guys, what's up? I hope that you're all doing well, and I hope that your preparations for the upcoming RBI Grade B exam are going really great. So, welcome to this two-part series for the chapter of monetary policy. So, this is the first part of the two-part series, and in this series, we're going to have a look at the chapter of monetary policy, which is a part of the ESI, that is Economics and Social Issues, part of the RBI Grade B syllabus. Okay, guys. So this chapter is really important for not just RBI Grade B, but also for NABARD and SEBI and any other exam where economics is a part of their syllabus. But in this specific video, we will actually try to orient our entire preparation of this monetary policy chapter towards the RBI Grade B exam, because we'll have a look at all the previous years, not just phase 2 but also phase 1 questions that have been asked from this chapter. And yes, even though this is a part of the phase 2, but monetary policy is such an important chapter that there's a lot of questions that have been asked in the phase 1 itself, and that is why it becomes a really crucial chapter for you guys. Okay, so we'll try to orient our entire study towards how the questions have been asked in the previous years and what all can be asked in the future as well. And I can assure you that if you go this way, you will be able to solve easily, get around 90% of the paper, and that is more than enough. No one needs to go to 100%, no one even can go to 100%. And if you have really gotten to 100% of the paper, then you probably put in 4 or 5 years, which is not necessary to put, right? So if you want to crack it in one attempt, this is the exact kind of strategy that you need. And with that positive note, with that positive goal ahead of us, that we will crack it in one attempt, and we will go about leveraging our time in the proper manner. We will not study anything extra, but whatever we study, we'll study it well. So, with that positive note, let's begin this chapter. So, monetary policy. First of all, in this first slide, you can see there are around 6 questions. In the second slide, there are another 4 questions. So, overall, I've brought you 10 questions, and all these 10 questions are the entire list of questions that has been asked in 2017, 18, and 19 from this chapter of monetary policy. And these include not just the phase 2 questions. The phase 2 questions are only 1, 2, 3, and 4 till here. Beyond this, you can see there are phase 1 questions. So there's at least 6 questions that have been asked in the last 4 years. Sorry, not even 4, in the last 3 years in the RBI Grade B exam, and that is how crucial this chapter is. They ask it in the phase 1, they ask it in the phase 2, and they've been asking it for years and years and years. And the interesting part is that in 2019, no question was asked in the phase 1 exam. You can see only 18 and 17 is there. No question was asked in the phase 1 exam from this chapter. And that is why it becomes really crucial this year, because there's a high chance now that they will try to ask something or the other this year in the phase 1 itself, and then another high chance that they'll ask it in the phase 2 itself as well. And why can they ask it in the phase 2 also? Because a lot of changes have been made to the PSL norms as well, and that happened very recently in September 2020. So that is also another thing that you need to go through, and I've made a video for that as well. I'll let you know how to find it. Okay, guys, so first of all, I would recommend that you pause the video over here, see these 6 questions, try to solve as many as you can. Do not take more than 30 to 40 seconds per question. If you can solve it, fine. If you can't, just make a note of what you can't solve, and I guarantee you towards the end of this chapter you will be able to solve all these questions. But right now, just try to assess yourself that where you stand, so that you can have a realistic view of how much effort you need to put in. Okay, so pause this slide and see. Fine. I hope that you've done these 6 questions. Now I'll move on to the next slide. Here there are 4 more questions. Again, take around 2 to 3 minutes at max, and try to solve all of these questions. And let's see how much you can solve. Okay, so pause and solve. All right, guys. I hope that you've solved these 4 questions as well. Now, to just give you a view of where you stand right now, if you were able to solve around 6 to 7 questions out of these 10, if you were able to solve 7, 8, 9, or 10, I would say that you stand at a good position right now. And I mean, with the level of preparation that you have for this chapter, you are really close to cracking the exam. And if you stand anywhere between 5 to 5 6 or 7, I mean between 5 and 7, in that case, I would say that you need to put in a bit more hard work. You know some part of it, but you still need to clear your basics. And if you were anywhere below 5 questions, including the phase 1 and phase 2 questions, I would say that you need to work really hard. And maybe you haven't studied this chapter as of yet, or if you have, then you haven't studied it properly. So you need to put a lot of attention to this chapter, what we are going to discuss now. Okay, guys. And do not worry, no matter where you stood, just make sure that you go through these videos in a proper manner, understand what I'm trying to say, make notes out of it, and then you at least go through the PDF notes that we provided. And I can guarantee you, if you do that, there's no way that you won't be able to solve the questions in the final exam. If you do all of this, I can guarantee next time if I come out with at least 10 questions, you will be able to solve maybe 9 or 10, not below that. Okay, guys. So, with that positive note, once again, we'll begin this chapter. So, first of all, what is monetary policy? So, I hope that you have, before coming to monetary policy, gone through the chapter of fiscal policy. Because in the chapter of fiscal policy, we understood the basics of the fact that there are two ways of controlling the economy of a nation on the macro level. Okay. So, macroeconomic level, there are two ways of controlling a country's economy, and those two ways are fiscal policy and monetary policy. Okay, so this fiscal policy is something that is set up by the government. That is what we studied in the chapter of fiscal policy. And I also told you in those videos that the monetary policy is something that is set up by the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, or in any other country, the central bank of that country in general. Right, guys? So, now in this chapter, we're going to discuss what exactly is this monetary policy, how the RBI makes it, and what are the tools for it, and what are the effects that this monetary policy has on the economy of the nation. Okay, so first of all, beginning with what the monetary policy is, it is a policy that is laid down by the Reserve Bank of India or the central bank in general for any country to manage the money supply in the economy. Now, this is a very, very crucial term over here. It's a keyword, manage the money supply. That is what this monetary policy primarily does. It manages the money supply. Okay, moving ahead. It is the most important instrument of controlling inflation in the economy. Okay, so inflation is the primary thing that we are always trying to target through the monetary policy. Okay, guys, moving ahead. Uh, it is set bi-monthly. That is once in every 2 months. Okay, so it is set bi-monthly by the Monetary Policy Committee, also known as the MPC, and the MPC has to meet at least 4 times in 1 year. Okay, so if you talk about bi-monthly, that is once in every 2 months. This turns out to be 6 times in 12 months. So ideally, they should meet around 6 times in 12 months to make and formulate the policy of the nation, the monetary policy. But they are always required to meet, no matter what the conditions are, at least 4 times in a year. Okay, and who meets? The Monetary Policy Committee or the MPC. Fine. Next, the fiscal policy. I mean, just like the fiscal policy, the monetary policy also tries to strike a balance between GDP growth and inflation. Okay, guys. So there's two things again: the growth and inflation, which both the monetary policy and the fiscal policy try to target. And as I told you in the chapter of fiscal policy, when we push more towards the growth, the inflation starts getting affected, and when we push more towards inflation, controlling inflation, the GDP growth starts getting affected. So an ideal fiscal policy always tries to strike a balance between GDP growth and inflation. Similarly, the monetary policy will also, in an ideal way, try to balance between the GDP and inflation. However, the monetary policy is a tool because it is set bi monthly, that is once in every 2 months. It is a tool that is much more dynamic in nature, right? Because when we read about the fiscal policy, it is set once a year by the government of India through the budget, right? We studied this now. It is made through the budget of the nation. Now, the budget is something that is released only once a year, but uh, the inflation is a very dynamic concept. So the prices of things keep skyrocketing, or maybe falling to the bottom. They keep varying a lot, especially for highly highly fluctuating commodities like food or fuel, including petroleum, and basically the things that we need in our everyday life, which are a big part, a big chunk of our expenses, but at the same time they can't be controlled very easily. And that is why inflation is a very very dynamic concept. So if we are towards the end of December, the inflation can be comparatively low as compared to the beginning of September or October, depending on how the harvests for Kharif and Rabi crops have been, right? So that is why inflation is very dynamic, and only the Monetary Policy Committee or the MPC is a, a committee which meets at least 6 times a year, or every 2 months, and the monetary policy is the tool which changes every 2 months. The fiscal policy stays constant for a year, but the monetary policy changes every 2 months, and that is a major reason why the monetary policy is used for controlling the inflation of the country, right? So when the prices start skyrocketing in a couple of months, the monetary policy committee can meet again and make changes as per those needs required by the economy of the nation. Okay, cool. So let's move ahead then. Flexible inflation targeting. Now, as I told you, inflation is the most important thing that we try to counter, or we try to strike a balance with in terms of using the monetary policy, right? So, first of all, how does the monetary policy target inflation? So, to target inflation, the monetary policy uses something known as flexible inflation targeting mechanism. Okay, flexible inflation targeting. And how, who, first of all, who gave this flexible inflation targeting mechanism? It was given by a committee which is known as the Urjit Patel Committee. This approach was given by this committee. Okay, and what does this approach say? This approach says that the RBI, or the Reserve Bank of India, will try to target or keep the inflation within a band of 4% plus minus 2%. So 4 minus 2 is 2 and 4 plus 2 is 6. So the band or the inflation target is 2 to 6%. This is where the Reserve Bank of India will always try to keep the inflation fixed. It will try that it should not go above 6% and it should not fall below 2%. Okay, so this has been in place, this mechanism has been in place since 5th of August 2016, and this target will stay in place, the 2 to 6% target will stay in place till 31st of March 2020, that is almost like 6 or 7 months from now. Okay, guys, and who actually put this target in place? It was put in place by the government of India in consultation with the Reserve Bank of India, and now it has been. And how was it put in place? It was put in place by the government through an amendment to the RBI Act of. Can you do you remember the year of RBI Act? It was in 1934. So that is when the RBI was first established through this act, and that is the basic act to which amendments are made when we need changes to be made to the Reserve Bank of India's how the way it functions or anything else. So the government amended the RBI Act of 1934, and that is how these flexible inflation targeting mechanisms were put into place. So this target is from 2016 August 2016 to 31st of March 2021, and the target is 2 to 6% of inflation. Okay, guys, now what happens if the Reserve Bank of India is not able to keep the inflation within this target band. If the Reserve Bank of India fails fails to keep the inflation inside this target tolerance limit band of 2 to 6%, or if it stays outside this target limit of 2 to 6% for 3 consecutive quarters. Now the keyword over here is 3 consecutive quarters, which means a quarter is one fourth, right? One fourth of a year is 3 months. So 3 quarters means 9 months. So if the inflation stays outside this tolerance limit band of 2 to 6% for 9 consecutive months, in that case, it is deemed that the monetary policy made by the Reserve Bank of India has failed. Okay, and what will happen if this the monetary policy made by the Reserve Bank of India fails? Sorry, Shaktiman, right? The Reserve Bank of India will be like, sorry, Shaktiman, sorry, government. So, the Reserve Bank of India will actually have to give a written explanation. A written, I'm sorry for my handwriting, guys. I'm still trying to learn how to write on this pad. But written, they'll have to give a written explanation. Okay, explanation or explain it. And when they will explain it in writing, the government will then make its own decision as to whether the Reserve Bank of India was right in doing what it did or not, or if the Reserve Bank of India has actually failed. Okay, guys, and in that case, that is how the further plan of action will be made. Because if the inflation has stayed outside the targeted band, then the the policy has definitely failed, so some changes definitely need to be made. And that is when the government will decide after that what is to be done, what amendments are to be made, what changes are to be made, who has to take care of the policy beyond that. Okay, so 3 consecutive quarters, 2 to 6%. If it stays outside that, then sorry, Shaktivan. Okay, let's move ahead, guys. Monetary Policy Committee. Now, we were since quite some time we were saying Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, MPC, and the MPC is what makes the monetary policy. So, what is the MPC? The MPC is basically a statutory body which is made by the Reserve Bank of India plus the government. So, two people come together to make one single body, that is known as the MPC or the Monetary Policy Committee. And this is actually a statutory body. Okay, so if both of them, how can it be possible that two bodies are coming together to make one committee? It's possible because this committee is actually made up of 6 members. Okay, 6 member committee, and out of these 6 members, here you can see that it's a 6 member body, and out of these 6 members, 3 are from the Reserve Bank of India, and the remaining 3 are appointed by the government. Okay, guys. So 3 are appointed by the government, and 3 are members from the Reserve Bank of India. ठीक है जी. Moving ahead, uh, this body has been constituted under the section 445 ZB of the amended RBI Act of 1934, the act that I was talking about a few moments back, right? So, under this act, this 6 member body has been made, or the MPC has been made. Moving ahead, half of the MPC members are from RBI and other half are from the government, as I told you, right? We'll talk about them in detail on a later slide. And the MPC has to meet at least 4 times a year, as I told you earlier. They, in reality, they meet 6 times, that is bi-monthly, but the bare minimum that they have to do is 4 times. And the quorum. So what is a quorum? Quorum is the bare minimum amount of members, the number of members out of the committee who need to be present for the meeting to take place. So the quorum is 4 members. If 4 members are present, a meeting can take place out of 6 if 4 are present. But if less than 4 members are present, then the meeting cannot officially take place. Okay, guys, moving ahead. Every member has a single vote with equal weightage. So there are 6 members, 3 from the RBI, 3 from the government. Each member has 1 vote, equal weightage. Now they take decisions based on majority of votes. Okay. So, but what will happen if these 3 members vote towards one side and these 3 members vote towards the other side? In that case, there's a tie, and a tie is always broken by a casting vote. Okay, and this casting vote lies with the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Why? Because he is also the head of the MPC. Okay, so whoever the governor is, or whoever is appointed as the governor of the Reserve Bank of India, ex officio, as in because of the fact that he is the governor, he or she automatically becomes the head of the Monetary Policy Committee. Okay, and when he or she becomes the head of the Monetary Policy Committee, he or she also gets a casting vote. So in case of a tie between the members, as in 3 members say yes and 3 say no, in that case whatever the governor says becomes the final decision of the MPC, and everyone has to stick to that decision. Okay, guys, moving ahead. Every 6 months, the Monetary Policy Committee has to release its monetary policy report. This is published by the Reserve Bank of India. Okay, guys, and this monetary policy report, which is released twice a year or every 6 months, it actually explains 2 things. The first is the sources of inflation, the sources of inflation, and the second is the forecast of inflation for the next 6 months to 18 months, that is half a year to 1.5 years. So the sources of inflation and the forecast for inflation, both of these lie in the monetary policy report. Okay, guys, moving ahead. Now we come to the members of the MPC. So till now what we studied was that there are 6 members of the MPC. 3 are from the Reserve Bank of India and 3 are from appointed by the government of India, right? So as you can see, these are currently the 6 members: 3 from the Reserve Bank, 3 from appointed by the government, and uh, they constitute the entire MPC or the Monetary Policy Committee. Now, who actually becomes a part of this? The first point over here is that the members which are from the Reserve Bank of India or the RBI members, those 3 are the ex officio members. That is, they do not have to be appointed, just because of the fact that they are in charge of their respective offices in the Reserve Bank of India. They automatically become a part of the MPC till the time they stay in office. Okay, and the first member is the chairman or the chairperson of the MPC, and that is the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Currently, who is the governor? It is Shakti Kanta Das. You need to remember this fact. Okay, so Shakti Kanta Das, who is the current governor of RBI, is also the chairman of the Monetary Policy Committee. Second, the second member from the Reserve Bank of India, or the second ex officio member, is the deputy governor of RBI, who is in charge of the monetary policy. Okay, so there is not one deputy governor in RBI, there are more than one deputy governors, generally 2 to 3 deputy governors at any given time, depending on how many retirements have taken place and whatnot. So, out of those 2 to 3 deputy governors, one is uh, in charge of the monetary policy. Okay, guys, and that particular deputy governor who's in charge of the monetary policy currently is MD Patra, or Michael Debabrata Patra, and he is the second member of the MPC. Okay, coming on to the third member is nominated by the Central Board of the Reserve Bank of India. Okay, so he's an officer in the Reserve Bank of India, generally of the level of executive director or ED, and that member is nominated by the Central Board of the Reserve Bank of India. Currently, that member is Janak Raj. Fine. So these are the three members that are sent by the Reserve Bank of India to the MPC. Moving ahead, these next three members are appointed by the GOI. They are appointed depending on a lot of factors, and that's purely the decision of the government and the ministry is concerned that who they want to send. So these are generally scholars or people of high, who are regarded highly in the financial sector. They are generally sent to this committee, and these are, the first one is Chetan Ghate, the second one is Pami Dua, and the third one is Ravindra H Dholakia or RH Dholakia. Okay, so these three are the members who have been appointed by the government of India, and these appointed members have a term of 4 years. This is very important, guys. You need to remember this, that these appointed members have a term of 4 years. Okay, and beyond that, they cannot be reappointed. So once they complete their 4-year term, they cannot be reappointed for a second term. That is also a very important point that you should know. Fine. So now we're done with the members and the entire monetary policy committee, and let's move ahead and see what else lies in this chapter now. Tools. Okay. So now we come on to what are the tools that are used under the monetary policy by the Reserve Bank of India and the Monetary Policy Committee to influence the economy of the nation at a macro level. Okay, guys. So when we come to these tools are primarily divided into two major parts. The first one is quantitative or indirect tools, and the second one is qualitative or direct tools. Fine. So what do you mean by quantitative tools? Quantitative tools are basically those tools which can actually be quantified in numbers. Okay. So for example, the repo rate is a rate which can always be quantified in numbers. It is at 4% or 6% or 8% or whatever it is, it can be quantified in numbers. So that is why these are quantitative tools, because they can be quantified in numbers, that how much is being put or put into the economy or taken outside the economy, how much money is being pumped in or pumped out of the economy. Okay, but when we come to the second one, that is the qualitative tools, these are the tools which cannot directly be uh, measured in numbers as to how much money is being put in or put out of the economy, but they are very important tools because they are direct. Okay, and these are indirect because these function in a very direct manner. They directly affect the amount of money that is in the economy. All right. So when we look at them, the quantitative or the indirect tools are further of a lot of types that have been given below. So almost every type out here is actually given in detail in the PDF notes that are provided to you along with our chapter. Okay, but I'll still try to give you a brief crux of what is happening over here so that you can understand them in a faster manner when you go through the notes. So the first tool on the quantitative side is the CRR. Okay, so the CRR is, you can write this down. Its full form is cash reserve ratio. Okay, cash reserve. I'm sorry. Let's write it in a better handwriting. Reserve ratio. Okay. So what is the cash reserve ratio? Cash reserve ratio or CRR is basically a part of the NDTL, a percentage of the NDTL which the bank or any bank has to keep with the Reserve Bank of India, RBI. Okay. So first of all, now there comes a concept of NDTL. What is NDTL? NDTL basically stands for net demand and time liabilities. Okay. Net demand and time liabilities. It is basically a measure of, in a very crude term, it is a measure of all the liabilities that the bank has. And what are the liabilities of the bank? The liabilities are all the deposits that it has, the FDs, the open deposits, savings banks, current accounts. All those are basically liabilities for the bank. So it is, in a crude sense, a measure of the entire amount of money that the bank owes to its investors or its debtors. Okay. And the NDTL, when once the bank knows what its NDTL is, every bank has a measure of the net demand and time liabilities that it has. Now the CRR, what it does is it gives us a percentage, and the current rate of CRR is 3%. So what happens is that every bank has to keep 3% of its NDTL or net demand and time liabilities as a deposit with the Reserve Bank of India at all times. And this deposit is not eligible for interest, not given interest. Okay, not paid interest. There's no interest paid on all of this. So, why does a bank have to do that? It is basically a kind of security or assurance from the bank's side that it will not run away, or in general that its demand and time liabilities, when those are being kept, there's an assurance for that with the Reserve Bank of India. Okay, and every bank has to do that. So the CRR is basically a kind of an assurance that is kept with the Reserve Bank of India by a bank, and it is a percentage of the NDTL or net demand and time liabilities of the bank. Okay, and currently the CRR is at 3%. Great. So we've just finished cash reserve ratio. Moving on to the next tool now. The next tool in the quantitative side is SLR. SLR now stands for statutory liquidity ratio. Okay, statutory liquidity ratio. It is basically a ratio of the total assets of the bank that it has to keep in liquid assets. Okay, so again, when we talk about ratios, they are generally taken in terms of percentages of the NDTL or net demand and time liabilities, the liabilities that the bank has to give to other people. Okay, so a percentage of the NDTL, currently this SLR stands at 18%, which means that 18% of the NDTL or net demand and time liabilities have to be kept by the bank in terms of highly liquid assets. Highly liquid is the key term over here. Highly liquid assets. And what assets are considered as highly liquid? Three kinds of assets are mainly considered as highly liquid. The first is cash, because cash is the most liquid asset in this world. Nothing can beat that. The second is gold. Gold is again a universal currency and it is highly liquid, can be sold at any point of time. And the third one is specific securities. Not all securities, but certain securities which have a very low risk and a high market, a big market. Such securities are also considered as highly liquid assets. And these securities, of course, include all kinds of GSECs or government securities. Okay, guys. So this is what you call the statutory liquidity ratio, or the SLR. This is basically a percentage of the entire NDTL which has to be kept in highly liquid assets. ठीक है? Moving ahead now, let me just erase this and then we'll move ahead. The third one is repo rate. Okay, so now this is very, very important. Basically, now we're coming to something that is asked, I can't even remember how many times. And this is again a quantitative tool. It is known as the repo rate. Repo rate, इसका full form is repurchase rate. Okay, so repo stands for repurchase. And what are they repurchasing? So this basically is, first of all, when a bank falls short of funds in the short term, it goes to the Reserve Bank of India. So bank has fallen short on funds, low on funds, it goes to the Reserve Bank of India, who is sitting on a pile of funds. I mean, RBI is the king over here. Sometimes RBI would be like, अपन को कभी कभी लगता है कि अपुनिच भगवान है, right? So the Reserve Bank of India, which is sitting on tons of funds because it is the regulator of the economy, it has the CRR and the SLR funds from so many banks. Apart from that, it is the organization that prints the money itself, so it has tons of money. And then what happens is that जब ये अपुनिच भगवान है बैठा हुआ है यहाँ पे, the bank falls short of money, where will it go? It will definitely go to the Reserve Bank of India, right? Now the Reserve Bank of India says ठीक है, अपुनिच भगवान है तो एक ले जा भाई यहाँ से, एक एक बैग ले जा पैसे का. Now the bank has enough money to fill its daily necessities, right? So because a bank has it always has to keep a fixed amount of liquid assets or cash in its accounts and everything. And it always has to keep its balance sheets equated. So towards the end of the day, if it's falling short of money, it goes to RBI बोलता है चल ठीक है ले जा एक बैग पैसे का. And then it takes that money, that bag of money, but what does it give to RBI in return? So in return, the bank gives RBI some of its securities. Okay. Securities. And when it gives RBI these securities, it also assures RBI with an agreement that after X amount of days, be it that may be 7 or 14 or 28 days, after that amount of days, I will come back to you, give you this bag of money, plus I will give you interest. So the bank has to pay money plus interest, and in return, the Reserve Bank of India will give the bank's securities back to it. Okay. And that is what repo means. So this repo is actually a repurchase agreement. They are agreeing on that very moment when RBI gives them money, they are agreeing to purchase this security back by giving RBI the money and the interest. And this interest, what the bank is paying, is actually the repo rate. Okay. And this repo rate currently stands at 4% after the MPC or the Monetary Policy Committee's meeting of August 2020. Okay. So this was all about repo rate. I hope you understood it. The bank basically goes to Reserve Bank of India, asks for money. The Reserve Bank of India takes its securities and gives it money, and then they sign a repurchase agreement, and this agreement states that after X amount of days, the bank will give them interest and money, and in return it will take back its securities. Now the interesting part over here is I said that this is a short term lending, this is not a long term lending. So this x can only be either 7 or 12, or I mean 7 or 14 or 24 days. Okay, so 28 days. So 28 is the maximum number of days for which this happens. Beyond that, it becomes long term lending, and that cannot be done under repo operations. Okay, guys, cool. So I think we should move ahead now. Moving ahead, the fourth one that comes over here is reverse repo rate. So now we just did repo or repurchase agreements. Now we move on to reverse repo agreements. So what is a reverse repo agreement or a reverse repo rate? So a reverse repo is basically the reverse or the opposite of repo. As simple as that. Reverse or the opposite of repo. Opposite means now the bank has a couple of extra bags of money. It goes to RBI and says that I have extra money at the end of my day's work and I do not know what to do with it. Okay, so I have two extra bags of money and these bags are lying idle with me. They are not paying any interest, they are not being invested anywhere. I need to use these two bags of money somewhere. So what the RBI says is fine, मेरे पास तो अपुनिच भगवान है, मेरे पास तो इतना सारा पैसा पड़ा हुआ है, लाइक आई हैव टन्स एंड टन्स ऑफ मनी, दो बैग तुम भी दे दो, आई डू नॉट केयर बिकॉज पीपल कीप कमिंग टू मी फॉर मनी, आई विल इन्वेस्ट इट समवेयर और द अदर, राइट? So what they do is the bank gives these two bags of money to the Reserve Bank of India, and now the Reserve Bank has two more bags, and in return the Reserve Bank of India gives the bank some securities. Okay, and these securities are then given to the bank again with an agreement that the bank will sell these securities back to the Reserve Bank of India after X number of days, which may be 7 or 14 or 28 days. And after these days, the bank will take its two bags of money with interest back. So this time the bank will get interest. And that interest that the bank gets is known as the reverse repo rate. Now, first of all, tell me one thing. You guys, I hope that most of you have bank accounts and you guys invest your money or at least keep your money in your bank. Now, you all know that when you go to your bank, if you ask them for a loan, they will probably give it to you at 10, maybe 11 or 12% interest rate, right? But when you go to them and you say that I want to have a fixed deposit or an FD, they will barely give you 6 to 8% as interest, right? And if you keep it in an open SB or a savings bank account, they will not give you more than 4% interest on it, right? So every bank will pay lesser interest on deposits and take more interest back from the customer from in terms of loans, right? Now the Reserve Bank of India is the बाप of banks, भगवान है ये बैंक्स का. और अगर बैंक ऐसा करते हैं तो आरबीआई विल बी लाइक, बेटा तुम हम ही से सीख के आए हो, अभी तुम प्रिंसिपल को मत सिखाओ, तुम अपने स्कूल के प्रिंसिपल को मत सिखाओ कि इसको करना कैसे है. आरबीआई knows how to play this game. So RBI always keeps the repo rate higher than the reverse repo rate because the reverse repo rate is the interest which RBI has to pay. But the repo rate is what the RBI gets from the banks. So as I told you that the repo rate is currently at 4%, the reverse repo rate is currently at 3.35%. So there is a gap of 0.65% between these two rates, and this 0.65% can also be written as 65 basis points. This is a very crucial term that you guys should know. Basis points. One basis point is actually equal to 0.01%. Okay, so 0.01% is equal to 1 bps or basis point. So 0.65% or 65 basis points is the difference between the current repo and the reverse repo rate. Okay, guys, great. So let's move ahead then. Moving ahead now, the next one is MSF. Okay, so the next rate is MSF. MSF stands for Marginal Standing Facility. Okay, MSF stands for Marginal Standing Facility. And what is this marginal standing facility? So, till now, what the banks were doing was short term borrowing and lending in terms of up to 28 days when they had securities to give or take in place of that money. Right. Now, what is happening is that in MSF or marginal standing facility, the bank goes to RBI for overnight borrowing. Okay, so here what happens is that the bank has somehow not been able to balance its balance sheets to somehow keep money properly in its balance sheets in the short term. So short term may somehow they're falling very short of money, and by short term I mean overnight over here. So overnight is like 24 hours, or you can also call it one day. Fine. So the bank needs money overnight. And in this case, it goes to the Reserve Bank of India and it tells the Reserve Bank that I don't have money, and I don't even have securities to give you right now. So I don't have money, as in I am falling short of money. Plus, I can't do repo operations with you because I do not have any more securities now. So what should I do? The Reserve Bank of India, then it also tells the Reserve Bank of India that remember, I gave you my SLR money, which is almost 18% of my NDTL, and you have kept it as highly liquid assets for me. The Reserve Bank of India says, right, you have your SLR. So now the bank says that I want to use this SLR because मुझे सिर्फ एक दिन के लिए चाहिए यार. I only need it for one day. Please let me do it for one day. So the bank is like, fine. The Reserve Bank is like, fine. I will only give you 24 hours. You use money. I will give you 2%. I will give you 2% of the money by dipping into your SLR or statutory liquidity ratio, but only 2%. And you can take that and you can use it to manage your overnight money problems. Okay. But because you are not going through the regular repo rate route where it was much more secure for the Reserve Bank of India, where you were giving securities instead of that, now you're not giving securities, so you have to pay an additional penal rate. Okay, a penal rate is nothing but the rate above the repo rate that the bank has to pay, and the penal rate in SLR currently is 0.25%, which means that in SLR the bank has to pay an interest rate of repo plus penal rate of 0.25%, which becomes 4.25%. This is what the bank is paying for SLR. Fine. Great. So let's move ahead then. Moving ahead uh, is OMOs. OMOs are much simpler. OMO is open market operation. In this, the Reserve Bank of India just either it buys securities or it sells securities. There's only two things that it can do. It will either buy security or it will sell securities in the open market. What will happen when the RBI buys securities? In this case, the RBI goes to the market and it buys securities. For buying, it will have to give money to the market. And when it gives money to the market, the supply of money in the market increases, right? And when the supply of money in the market will increase, when the supply of anything in the market increases, its value decreases, right? So when the supply of money in the market will increase, its value will start decreasing, which means inflation will start rising because more money will be used for buying the same amount of products that could be bought earlier. Okay. And just the opposite happens when the RBI goes and sells securities in the market, because when it will sell securities, then the amount of money in the market will reduce, because people will then give money to the Reserve Bank of India to buy securities from them. And once the amount of money in the market reduces, the inflation will fall, because now lesser money is available for chasing the same amount of resources in the market. And when when something falls shorter, or when its supply reduces in the market, then the simple demand supply economics says that its value will rise. So when its supply falls short, its value will rise, which means that the inflation will fall, because inflation is nothing but how much products can be bought with a fixed amount of money. So when it buys securities, inflation rises, and when it sells security, inflation falls. Okay, these are OMOs, or open market operations. And the final one is bank rate. Bank rate is pretty simple. Bank rate is the rate at which RBI lends to banks without any securities. So this time the banks are not giving any securities. They are just taking money from the RBI, and for those agreements are, by the way, longer run. Okay, so these are for longer periods of time. The MSF was also without securities, but it was overnight. And for doing it overnight, they could dip into their SLR pockets for 2%. But now this is for longer times. Longer times means more than 28 days. And in that case, again, they have to pay a penal interest of 0.25%, which means they are paying 4.25% in this case as well. That is the bank rate right now, and that is for longer time periods without any securities being given by the bank. Great. So now we have completed the basic quantitative tools. Now let's move on to the qualitative tools over here. That is those tools which can not be quantified in numbers. Like all of these tools, the tools that we did right now, all of them you could have quantified them in numbers, as in 4%, 4.25%, or 3.335%. That was the number what was being charged for these tools, right? But now for the other tools that we are going to consider right now, they can't directly be quantified, so they are qualitative tools. However, those tools are direct, and the quantitative tools, they were indirect. Okay, so let's see. First of all, the first tool is loan to value ratio. It's a very important tool. It is also known as LTV ratio, loan to value ratio. So what is this loan to value ratio? This is basically the amount of loan that any bank can give for to any person, when that person gives any kind of assurance. For example, you go to a bank, there's a number of ways you can take a loan. The first is you give them gold as a security, right? Gold loans are going very famous these days. Second is you give them any land or property papers as a security, right? So land or property papers as security. Or the third is if you have any kind of a fixed deposit or any other deposit with a bank, you can use that as well as a security against which they will lend you a loan. Now, suppose if you are going to a bank and you give them a gold of 1 crores as a security, will they give you a loan of 1 crores against that gold worth 1 crores? No, they will never give it, because there's a lot of other things that come into factor as well, including the fact that if you default on that 1 crore loan, then there will also be interest that you can default on. And if you default on loan plus interest which goes beyond the security, then there's a problem with which the bank is going getting itself into, right? So there's a lot of factors which come into play over here, and generally the loan is never equal to the value or the asset that you have. So the loan to value ratio is generally less than 100%, and this is actually set by the Reserve Bank of India as a qualitative tool. They can keep it at 70% or 80% depending on how much money they want to be supplied in the market. And accordingly it's actually different for different kinds of loans like gold loan and land property, or going according to that. It's also different for different types of banks, like it's different for commercial banks, it's different for RRBs, it's different for the non those NBFCs. So it's different for different kinds of banks, and it's set up by the Reserve Bank of India. So that's the first qualitative tool, the loan to value ratio. The second one is moral suasion. So moral suasion is something where the bank makes uh, the Reserve Bank of India makes banks do something without them actually having to legally or bindingly do it. So suppose the Reserve Bank of India tells the other all the other banks that you should reduce your loans or borrowings at this point of time. You should reduce your credit that is being given to the people at this point of time. If that is what the Reserve Bank of India tells them, then they are not legally bound to do so, because the Reserve Bank of India just came and told them that you should do so. It is not that you must do so, it is you should do so. And there is no condition with it that if you do not do so you'll be liable to some kind of penalty or something. No, it is just a simple moral suasion. But most banks will do it because if the Reserve Bank of India is saying it, there must be a reason behind it. And every bank will also want the economy to be in healthy shape. That is how even they will earn. And mostly what the Reserve Bank of India says in terms of moral suasion is also really good for the bank. It is something that even the bank needs. So these are moral suasions are generally mostly uh, they are relied to by the bank, and the bank actually does these things. So that's what moral suasion is. It is not something that is legally binding, but it is morally binding. The third is the PSL norms. This is a separate topic in itself. It's a very big topic. I mean, not super big as in, but this topic is extremely crucial right now because something has happened in September. And what has happened is that in September 2020, the Reserve Bank of India has amended its PSL norms. It has brought about a lot of changes in these PSL norms. And because it has been done in September, so the exam which is going to be held probably in December or January, it becomes extremely important as a current affair topic for both prelims as well as mains, or the phase 1 or phase 2 as you call it. So the PSL norms is extremely important, and uh, I'll just tell you that the PSL norms stand for priority sector lendings, but there's a lot of things that are into it. And I have actually made a separate video for it where I have explained in detail all the PSL norms and all the changes that have been brought about in the September 2020 notification of the Reserve Bank of India. And I would highly recommend that you go through that video to understand the PSL norms, and you can find it on YouTube. So I would highly recommend that you go to YouTube, you find the PSL norms video in the ESI series for RBI Grade B on our Lit Mode channel, and please do go through it because I am highly anticipating at least one question to come out of it. So there's a high chance. Please do go through it. Okay, moving ahead, the final one that comes under qualitative ones is credit rationing. And what is credit rationing? Credit rationing basically is something where you ration the credit, the amount of loans that are being given. So basically, the Reserve Bank of India kind of rations the credit, tells the banks that this is the amount of loans you can give. Now, even if the market is booming, even if a lot of loans are actually being demanded by the businessmen or the market in general, if the Reserve Bank of India has rationed that you can give X amount of credit, or you can give X percentage of credit, then no bank can go beyond that, and that is known as credit rationing. Okay. And why is it done? It is done for conditions like what has arisen right now. So the credit rationing was lesser when the before the COVID-19 pandemic scenario came in. But as the economy started falling with the COVID-19, the Reserve Bank of India wanted to pump in a lot of money into the economy so that the businesses, the MSME sector, and the economy in general could rise back again. And in that case, the credit rationing was reduced and more credit was pumped into the market, despite the fact that the amount of NPAs was rising. Still, the credit rationing was loosened up. So, that is again a very, very important tool of monetary policy. Okay, guys. So that's it for the part one. It went on for really long. I mean, it really went on for almost an hour. So, but I hope that we've covered a lot of topics over here. I hope that you can understand the chapter in a much better form now. And after this, you can watch the part two video. And I hope that if you're having any doubts, if there's something that you haven't understood after this video, I would recommend that you put your doubts in the discussion section below, and we will definitely try to answer all of those queries, those doubts that you have. And if they're still not being answered, you can then write to us at our email ID, which is hi@litmode.in. But I don't think you'll have to go there. If you put your doubts in the discussion section, most of them will be answered. I am sure of that, because I'll personally take care of that. Don't worry. Okay. So still, if you still have some doubts which are not being answered, if you still want to know something else about our courses, you can write to us at hi@litmode.in. Okay. Thank you so much for watching the part one, guys. I'll meet you in the part two video now.